The American Locomotive Company are often shortened to Alco, or Alco, designed, built and sold steam locomotives, diesel-electric locomotives, diesel engines and generators, specialized forgings, high-quality steel, armed tanks and automobiles, and produced nuclear energy. The American Locomotive Company was formed in 1901 by the merger of Schenectady Locomotive Engine Manufactory of Schenectady, New York with 7 smaller locomotive manufacturers. The American Locomotive Automobile Company subsidiary designed and manufactured automobiles under the Alco brand from 1905 to 1913 and produced nuclear energy from 1954 to 1962. The company changed its name to Alco Products, incorporated in 1955. In 1964 the Worthington Corporation acquired the company. The company became defunct in 1969. Foundation and early history. The company was created in 1901 from the merger of 7 smaller locomotive manufacturers with Schenectady Locomotive Engine Manufactory of Schenectady, New York, Brooks Locomotive Works in Dunkirk, New York, Cook Locomotive and Machine Works in Paterson, New Jersey, Dixon Manufacturing Company in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Manchester Locomotive Works in Manchester, New Hampshire, Pittsburgh Locomotive and Car Works in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island Locomotive Works in Providence, Rhode Island, Richmond Locomotive Works in Richmond, Virginia. The newly formed company was headquartered in Schenectady, New York. Samuel R. Callaway left the presidency of the New York Central Railroad to become president of Alco. When Callaway died on June 1, 1904, Albert J. Pitkin succeeded him as president of Alco. In 1904, the American Locomotive Company acquired control of the Locomotive and Machine Company of Montreal, Quebec, Canada. This company was eventually renamed the Montreal Locomotive Works. In 1905, Alco purchased Rogers Locomotive Works of Paterson, New Jersey, the second largest locomotive manufacturer in the U.S. behind Baldwin Locomotive Works. In the post-World War II period, Alco operated manufacturing plants only in Schenectady and Montreal, having closed all the others. After the American Locomotive Company ceased locomotive manufacturing in the United States in 1969, Montreal Locomotive Works continued to manufacture locomotives based on Alco designs. Steam locomotives. Alco was the second largest steam locomotive builder in the United States, producing over 75,000 locomotives. Among these were a large number of well-known locomotives. Railroads that favored Alco products included the Delaware and Hudson Railway, the New York, New Haven and Hartford Railroad, the New York Central Railroad, the Union Pacific Railroad and the Southern Pacific. Alco was known for its steam locomotives, of which the 464 Hudson, 482 Mohawk and the 484 Niagara built for the New York Central and the 484 FEF and the 4664 built for the Union Pacific were fine examples. Alco built many of the biggest locomotives ever constructed, including Union Pacific's Big Boy. Other than the Delaware and Hudson's application of SKF roller bearings to the driver's main and side rods of their own 462 locomotives in 1924, Alco built the first production steam locomotive in North America to use roller bearings, Timken 1111, a 484 commissioned in 1930 by Timken Roller Bearing Company, was used for 100,000 miles on 15 major United States railroads before it was purchased in 1933 by the Northern Pacific Railway. During World War II, Alco produced many 2100 decapods for the USSR. Many of these were undelivered at the end of the war, and 10 of these were sold to Finland in 1947. 1. Alco Builders No. 75214 is preserved at the Finnish Railway Museum, though the dual service 484 steam locomotive had shown great promise. 1948 was the last year that steam locomotives were manufactured in Schenectady. These were the 7A2A Class 9400 Series Pittsburgh and Lake Erie Railroad 284 Berkshires. Quote, "The tenders had to be subcontracted to Lima Locomotive Works, as Alco's tender shop had been closed. The building was converted to diesel locomotive manufacture to compete with locomotives manufactured by the automobile industry." Joseph Burroughs Ennis was the senior vice president between 1917 and 1947 and was responsible for the design of many of the locomotives manufactured. Alco Automobiles. The company diversified into the automobile business in 1906, producing French Berlier designs under license. Production was located at Alco's Rhode Island Locomotive Works in Providence, Rhode Island. 2 years later, the Berlier license was abandoned, and the company began to produce its own designs instead. An Alco racing car won the Vanderbilt Cup in both 1909 and 1910 and competed in the first Indianapolis 500 in 1911, driven on all 3 occasions by Harry Grant. But Alco's automotive venture was unprofitable, and they abandoned automobile manufacture in 1913. The Alco automobile story is notable chiefly as a step in the automotive career of Walter P. Chrysler, who worked as the plant manager. In 1911 he left Alco for Buick in Detroit, Michigan, where he subsequently founded the Chrysler Corporation in 1925. Diesel-electric locomotives. For a list of Alco diesel locomotive models, see List of Alco diesel locomotives. Although strongly committed to the steam locomotive, Alco produced the first commercially successful diesel-electric locomotive in 1924 in a consortium with General Electric and Ingersoll Rand. This locomotive was sold to the Central Railroad of New Jersey. It built additional locomotives for a number of railroads, including the Long Island Railroad and the Chicago and Northwestern Railway. The company bought an engine manufacturer, McIntosh and Amp Seymour Diesel Engine Company, in 1929 and henceforth produced its own diesel engines. Its electrical equipment was always from GE. The transition from steam to diesel was largely overseen by Perry T. Egbert, vice president in charge of diesel locomotive sales and later president of the company. In the 1930s, Alco was the preeminent diesel locomotive builder in the United States, but the General Motors Electromotive division took over the position with aggressive marketing, a ready supply of development capital from its parent company, and the intervention of government demands during the years of World War II. During that troubled time, Alco was allocated the construction of diesel switching locomotives, a handful of Alco DL-109 dual-service engines and its proven steam designs, whereas EMD was allocated the construction of mainline road freight diesels. Alco's revolutionary RS-1 road switcher was selected by the U.S. Army for a vital task. Alco ranked 34th among United States corporations in the value of wartime production contracts. The Kriegsmarine's capital ships, led by the Tirpitz and the Luftwaffe, were threatening Allied shipping to the Soviet Union at the port of Murmansk from bases in Norway. This was, at the time, the Soviet lifeline. Thanks to successes in Africa, the U.S. was able to rehabilitate the Trans-Iranian Railway and extend it to the USSR. They chose as locomotives the Mini 1 Serbian dinars, a 6-axle, 6-traction motor variant of the light Alco. Not only was the company prevented from selling these locomotives to mainline U.S. railroads, the 13 RS-1s that had already been built were commandeered for Iranian duty and converted to -1 Serbian dinars. This gave EMD a lead in the diesel locomotive market that could not be overcome. Also a factor was that Alco's diesel locomotives were competing with its own steam locomotive products, while EMD had no such overlap. In 1940, Alco and GE entered into a partnership to build diesels under the name Alco GE, an arrangement that lasted until 1953. By 1948, Alco controlled 40% of the diesel locomotive market. PA and FA-type road units, as well as the ubiquitous S-series switches and RS-series road switches, represented Alco well in those years of motive power transition. Much of the success in this period can be tied to the pioneering RS locomotives, representing the first modern road switcher, a configuration which has long outlasted Alco. General Electric was represented in the electrical gear of every locomotive produced by Alco. In the complete conversion to diesels, Alco was not able to maintain this production standing. The company held the number 2 position in the market until General Electric, dissatisfied with the results of its partnership with Alco, entered the domestic road diesel locomotive market itself in 1956. GE quickly took the number 2 position from Alco, and eventually eclipsed GM-EMD in overall production. Despite continual innovation in its designs, Alco gradually succumbed to its competition, in which its former ally, General Electric, was becoming an important element. A new line of century locomotives, including the C630, the C430 and the C636, the first 3,600 horsepower locomotive, failed to keep the enterprise going. Third place in the market proved to be an impossible position. Alco Products had neither the market position or reputation for reliability of GM-EMD's products, nor the financing muscle and customer support of GE. It could not earn enough profits. In the late 1960s, Alco gradually ceased locomotive production, shipping its last 2 locomotives, a pair of T6 switches, to the Newborough and South Shore Railroad in January 1969. Alco closed its Schenectady locomotive plant later that year, and sold its designs to the Montreal Locomotive Works in Canada. Diversification. Alco diversified into areas other than automobiles with greater success. During World War II, Alco built munitions for the war effort, in addition to locomotive production. This continued throughout the Korean War. After the Korean War, Alco entered the oil production equipment and nuclear power plant markets. With the latter, it began to manufacture heat exchangers for nuclear plants. In 1955, the company was renamed Alco Products, Inc., because locomotives were no longer its predominant product. Purchase and division. The company was purchased in 1964 by the Worthington Corporation, which merged with the Studebaker Corporation in 1967 to form Studebaker Worthington, Inc., Alco remaining a wholly owned subsidiary. Former divisions of Alco became semi-independent subsidiaries in 1968. After the termination of locomotive production in 1969, the locomotive designs were transferred to the Montreal Locomotive Works, which continued the manufacture. The diesel engine business was sold to White Motor Corporation in 1970, which developed White Industrial Power. In 1977, and White Industrial Power was sold to the British The General Electric Company plc, which renamed the unit Alco Power, Inc. The business was subsequently sold to the Fairbanks Morse Corporation, which continues to manufacture Alco-designed engines in addition to their own design. The heat exchanger business continued as Alco Products, Inc. for a time. At some later point, some of the heat exchanger products were manufactured by the Alco Products division of Smithco Engineering, Inc. in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In January 1983, certain assets of the Alco Products division of Smithco, namely double pipe and hairpin type heat exchanger products sold under the Alco Twin name, mark and style, were sold in an asset sale by Smithco to Boss Hatton, Inc., who are a subsidiary of Nitram Energy, Inc. Following the sale of these assets, Smithco remained in business, manufacturing other heat exchange products. In 1985, the assets acquired from Smithco were assigned by Boss Hatton, Inc. to its parent, Nitram. In 2008, Nitram was acquired by Peerless MFG Co. In 2015, Peerless sold its heat exchanger business to Koch Heat Transfer Co. Epilogue. After the closure of Alco's Schenectady works, locomotives to Alco designs continued to be manufactured in Canada by Montreal Locomotive Works and in Australia by A.E. Goodwin. In addition, Alco-derived locomotives formed the major chunk of diesel power on the Indian railways. Many thousands of locomotives with Alco lineage are in regular mainline use everywhere in India, and around 100 new locos are added every year. Most of these locomotives are built by the Diesel Locomotive Works, located at Varanasi, India. The Diesel Loco Modernization Works at Patiala, India, do midlife rebuilding and upgrading the power of these locomotives. Typically the 2,600 horsepower WDM2 to 3,100 horsepower. See also Indian locomotives. A number of Alco and MLW diesel electric locomotives are in daily use hauling freight trains of the Hellenic Railways organization in Greece. The oldest of them were delivered to the former Hellenic State Railways in 1962. In addition to a variety of standard gauge locomotives, the fleet includes 11 meters gauge Alco locomotives, mainly used for departmental trains in the Peloponnese network. The MX 627 and MX 636 locomotives have been extensively rebuilt at Piraeus Central Factory Vos. The remaining Alco locomotives are also being rebuilt, starting with models DL532B and DL537. The Alco 251 diesel engine is still manufactured by Fairbanks Morse of Beloit, Wisconsin, a company which also manufactured diesel locomotives. Additionally, Alco diesel engines are used to power the NASA Crawler transporter. Alco and MLW locomotives still work on many regional and tourist railroads across the United States and Canada, including the Delaware-Lackawanna Railroad in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the Catskill Mountain Railroad in Kingston and Phoenix, New York, the Livonia, Avon and Lakeville Railroad family of lines based in Lakeville, New York, and the Middletown and Hummelstown Railroad in Middletown, Pennsylvania. The M&H owns one of the last true Alco switches ever built, #1016. The 1016 is a T6 type switcher engine. This and Alco Sister 151 provide daily service in Middletown. Two original Alco RS2s that were delivered to the Nevada Northern Railway are still in operation. Alco Coke 280 number 18, built in 1920, survives in passenger service on the Arcade and Amp Attica Railroad in Arcade, New York. It returned to service in in May 2009 after a 6-year overhaul to bring it into compliance with the FRA's new steam locomotive regulations. Great Western 60, a 280 built in Schenectady in 1937, currently operates in passenger service on the Black River and Amp Western Railroad in Ringgoes, NJ. Some Alcos survive on Australian networks, as well as in Bangladesh and Pakistan. Another fleet of Alco Bombardier locomotives run in rugged terrain on the Sri Lanka Railway network. Argentina also has a healthy fleet of Alco's DL 540 running commuter and cargo trains. The Glenbrook Vintage Railway in the Franklin District, south of Auckland, New Zealand, has a 2-4-4-2 articulated compound mallet, built by Alco in 1912. Only 4 mallets with this wheel arrangement were ever built, the other 3 by Baldwin. This unique loco is currently out of service awaiting overhaul. During the 1970s, Romania's UCMR Rosita made licensed engines from Alco, parting the engines 6 and AMP 12R251 into naval gensets, and also with the 6R251 in Factory were made locomotives known as LDH 1500 CP. They were also exported in Iran and Greece. Preserved Alco steam locomotives. While regular production of steam locomotives by Alco ended in the 1950s, Alco-built steam engines have been preserved in locations across North America. They can be found on the Nevada Northern Railway in Ely, Nevada, in the Orange Empire Railway Museum in California, and on the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad in Colorado. Several Alco-built mainline engines are still operational, such as Union Pacific 844, Union Pacific 3985, Milwaukee Road 261, Sioux Line 1003, and Sioux Line 2719. What is probably the most famous Alco steam locomotive ever built, Union Pacific Big Boy 4014, is being restored by the Union Pacific Railroad for excursion service. In Portugal, an Alco 282 locomotive built 1945 is undergoing major restoration to be displayed at the National Railway Museum at Entroncamento. Popular culture. In February 2014, in the episode The Locomotive Manipulation of the TV series The Big Bang Theory, takes place on a train pulled by what is described as an Alco FA4. Noted railroad artist Howard Fogg began his career at Alco, hired in 1946 as ALCO's new company artist. Fogg began painting locomotives in the livery of prospective customers, as well as taking photographs of them. At an Alco gala at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, Lucius Beebe, a noted journalist with the New York Herald Tribune, sought out Fogg. Beebe was considering leaving New York to pursue writing of railroad books. They began a long-term collaboration, with Beebe buying a number of paintings over the years and commissioning new Fogg paintings for use in his books. In 1947, Beebe's book, Mixed Train Daily, was the first of many to use a Fogg painting on the cover. Fogg was also used by many other railroad authors because of his skill at capturing action shots, with commissions from individuals, authors, publishers, railroads, and related industrial firms flourishing. In 1957, Fogg ended his formal agreement with Alco. He continued to paint periodic commissions for them for a number of years.